Hi there, my name's Simon Drew, and I'd like to welcome you to the Practical Stoic podcast, where I give you practical Stoic advice for modern times. If you'd like to learn more about Stoicism, or if you want some added inspiration in your day, just go to my website. It's risetothegoodlife.com. If you're interested in transforming your life with Stoic principles, then I also offer one-on-one coaching. To book your first free session, just head to risetothegoodlife.com/coaching and follow the links. But for now, enjoy this episode. Hi there, my name's Simon Drew, and welcome to the Practical Stoic podcast. A while ago, I talked with a fan of the podcast, and they mentioned to me that they would love to know how a Stoic would approach acts of extreme evil. How would a Stoic respond to terrible acts of injustice or horrifying atrocities? I also wondered what the Stoic response to this might be. And a part of the answer came recently when I was reading the Wise Meditations from Marcus Aurelius. He said, quote, "Evil, the same old thing. No matter what happens, keep this in mind. It's the same old thing, from one end of the world to the other. It fills the history books, ancient and modern, and the cities and the houses too. Nothing new at all. Familiar. Transient." End quote. So basically what Marcus Aurelius is saying here is that if you really look at the history of humanity, and if you study the horrifying acts that people have done to one another in the recent and distant past, you'll soon come to understand that there is nothing new in the evil that you see today. People have always murdered and plundered and started wars and kidnapped people and indulged in all kinds of horrible acts. There is nothing new. People have always been corrupt and deceitful, and it will continue to be like this. All that you have to do is look at the past 100 years of history, and you'll soon realize that we are not so different from those people who Marcus Aurelius had to deal with on a daily basis nearly 2,000 years ago. Within our society, there are still murderers, rapists, pedophiles, kidnappers, corrupt officials, and every other kind of wrongdoer. And if you don't have a good grasp of history, and if you watch the news often, it might be easy to come to the conclusion that humanity is more evil than ever before. But this is simply not the case. As Marcus Aurelius said, there is nothing new. Having an understanding that there are no new evils is actually helpful to the Stoics. This information and a clear understanding of history can allow us to bypass the surprise, anger, and awe, and instead focus on how we can be most effective in making the world a better place. Because one thing that we need to understand is that the world was not made better by people who cried. It was made better by people who acted, by people who decided that they would not accept the evils that were happening around them, people who decided that they weren't going over the cliff with the rest of the crowd. And so, how would a Stoic actually deal with such a situation? How would a Stoic face evil within the home or community? I would offer this simple suggestion. A true Stoic would be a shining example of someone with wisdom, virtue, courage, and temperance. Wisdom because he knows what is right and what is wrong, and he knows what he can control and what he can't. Virtue because his values are unfailing. Courage because he is willing to stand up to the wrongdoer and declare that what they are doing is harming not only themselves, but all of humanity. And temperance, because he does not fight evil with evil. Instead, he knows that the most effective way to deal with the situation is to act rationally, and to act with virtue at every step. It all comes back to personal responsibility. The Stoic starts with himself, and moves from there. I think it would be a mistake on my part if I didn't also point out that the true Stoic will never engage in evil wrongdoings because he knows that it is better for him to die than to lose his virtue. I think that this idea is shared no better than in the following story told by Seneca. He says, quote, "The story of the Spartan boy has been preserved. Taken captive while still a stripling, he kept crying in his Doric dialect, 'I will not be a slave.' And he made good on his word. For the very first time he was ordered to perform a menial and degrading service, the command of which was to fetch a chamber pot, he dashed out his brains against the wall. So near at hand is freedom, and is anyone still a slave?" End quote. Obviously, this story is more about keeping your freedom, but it's also pretty clear that the Stoics really valued courage in the face of evil. In fact, they valued it so much that it was seen as proper to kill yourself before you were forced to submit to evil and tyranny. By doing this, you were able to maintain your virtue, and in this case, the enslaved Spartan died as a free man, with his values intact. Obviously, I wouldn't necessarily encourage you to go that far, but I would say this. When you see evil in the world, or when you feel as though you are being encouraged to participate in some act that is clearly wrong, understand that it is always within your power to remain virtuous. It is always in your power to make the right choice and to act out of the best interests of humanity. Which brings me to my final point that I want to make. If you look into the history of humanity, I think that very few people would disagree with the fact that we are now living in the greatest period in human history. Yes, there are many improvements that we still need to make, but if you really look at it, and if you really study history, you'll find that things are a lot better than they used to be. And why is this the case? Well, if you ask me, it has everything to do with the fact that as time goes on, individuals decide to be better, kinder, less judgmental, more caring, and more virtuous. Individuals change, and the world changes. Whenever humanity takes a step forward, it is because individuals decide to be better. So if you were to ask me how a Stoic would most effectively respond to evil, I would simply say this: don't be evil. The simple act of one person deciding to not go over the cliff with the rest of the herd is enough to completely change the course of history. Choose to remain virtuous, and you are doing more good than you can possibly imagine. Choose to stand up to evil, and you can change more lives than you'll ever know. Live your values, be kind, love more, teach more, and learn more, and you'll be doing more to combat evil than most people ever will. That is the Stoic response. I'll talk to you in the next episode, but until then, I hope that this episode has helped you on your rise to the good life. Ciao. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Practical Stoic Podcast. I hope that you've gotten a lot of value out of it, and I hope that it helps you to live a better life. If you have enjoyed the podcast, then don't forget to subscribe so that you'll be the first to know when there are new episodes. If you really love the podcast, then I would appreciate a positive review, whether that's on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, or wherever else you listen. Don't forget that if you're interested in one-on-one Stoic coaching, then you can head to risetothegoodlife.com/coaching to book your first free session today.